Plateau, and I will be able to take and talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. And then we have the confined zone. That's that area I was telling you about before. That is the hard hat area, and that's this stuff right over here. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to drill through. Now this picture is just a little bit off because this saline, this salty area, is actually a little deeper than what it shows because the Trinity Aquifer actually goes underneath the Edwards in this entire area. And so that kind of gives you a first look. That's the area where you drive down Walnut Street and you drive down that hill into New Braunfels. And then Smithson Valley High School is located there, and I put that there because that's where the most westerly drop is that drops water into the Edwards Aquifer for recharge. And so let's get to that part. Here first is the contributing zone, and you notice that the contributing zone, we're right over in here. The contributing zone goes way up here above Rock Springs. It's way above Kerrville. It's way above San Marcos. And if you look at that, you can see that it follows the rivers. You see the rivers coming down, and so the water is just going downhill, which makes sense. So some water, not all water, is contributing in some way to the recharge of the Edwards. And I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. And then you have the recharge zone itself, and the recharge zone is the area where the water actually drops in. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because where the water drops in is closer to this green line that you see right there. The water actually drops into various holes, and there are many, many, many of them throughout the greater hill country area. Down here in the artesian zone, the water pressure gets to be so heavy that it will literally push the water up out of the ground in some of the areas. There's some wells in and around Hondo and Castroville that have so much pressure that the water will just come to the surface if a well is drilled. That's the artesian zone. And so when you talk about how it gets recharged, how the water gets into the Edwards Aquifer, there's some cracks in the limestone like you see right there. Some of the water stays underground, some of it flows overground, then goes underground, then back on the surface again. But eventually it gets over to a sinkhole that's something like that, and then it drops into some caves that are like this, and then sometimes there's a spring that comes out in that area like that. So first, let's take a look at what the water looks like when it falls into one of those holes. And folks, that's actually the way it happens. That's the one by Smithson Valley High School. The water just goes right along the ground and drops into that hole, and it's your drinking water. And then, if I go back over here to the caves, when it falls into these holes, it falls into caves, and those caves look just like that. So that's one of them lit up. And sometimes when we see the evening news, it'll say that the water level or the aquifer level is such and such. It is always the Edwards, never the Trinity, and it does not mean the height of the water here. It means something else that I'll get to here in just a little bit. And the last thing is the spring, and some of you have gone over to Landa Park, maybe sat on that bench over there and watched the water come out of the side of the hill, and it's just kind of really absolutely beautiful. It's a very refreshing kind of place. So when we talk about the Edwards, when they say that the water temperature, not water temperature, the water level is such and such, they are always talking about the water level in the J17 well. Now the J17 well is going to be above that limestone. It is actually into one of the karst caves, and what happens along the way is that this top of the well, that part right over there, is actually 731 feet above sea level. But the water never gets that high. It can never get that high. It doesn't get enough pressure. So then what happens is new water falls into that area that we talked about before. Remember, that's the stuff that's on the Balcones Fault. The water is not just on the Walnut Street. It's actually all along the Balcones Fault. And when it drops into that water, it then takes and starts to flow, and it builds up some pressure, and the pressure pushes up this well. And whenever the water level stops there, that's what's known as the water elevation. So that's what you hear whenever you are listening to the evening news and they say that the water level is 581 feet. That means it's slightly lower than what you have right there. If it's at 650 feet, that's the same elevation as the base of the tower. So that's how you can kind of gauge it, if you will, but it is not the actual level of the water, it's the level of the pressure pushing that water up J17. And some of you already know that. I'm probably speaking to the choir when I talk about that. So there's never enough pressure to overflow the J17, meaning that it will never get higher than 731 feet. It just won't, there's not enough pressure that it can generate. And then there's a very strong positive correlation between the height of that well and the Comal spring that we talked about just briefly. Now, let me take and jump off of that and go over to the Trinity Aquifer. And before I do that, I should mention that the Edwards, you probably already know it, but the Edwards Aquifer is completely allocated. There is no more water to allocate to anybody. So if you have a property above that, and it's 5 acres or more, and you wanted to drill a well, you must drill through the Edwards into the Trinity and get your water out of the Trinity. You cannot drill any wells in the Edwards any longer, and you need a permission from both of those various organizations. So let's talk about the Trinity. Again, we already talked about the confining layer, and the Trinity looks like this. It's completely different than what you would have for the Edwards Aquifer. First, you have the upper Trinity area, typically known as the Glen Rose. So if you know somebody who has a well that's into the Trinity and they're in about 450 feet-ish area, they're drawing water out of the Glen Rose. If they have a well that's about 750 feet, they're probably in the Hensel, and the Hensel is the next layer. These are separated layers. They don't really interact. They have confining layers under both. And then the deepest part of the lower Trinity is either the Pearsall or the Hostin, and in our area here, it's almost always the Hostin. Very rarely is it the Pearsall. We just don't get very much in the way of the Pearsall over here. So we talked about recharging the Edwards. What about recharging the Trinity? Are they the same? No, they aren't even close. Sometimes people feel that just because they get a bunch of rain up in Dallas, that somehow that water is beneficial to us down here by San Antonio. It is not. We get absolutely no benefit of it whatsoever. The water moves underground excruciatingly slow. The water up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area would never ever get down here to where we are. It's not physically possible for it to do that, even though it's in the same aquifer. Whatever falls here recharges the aquifer here. And here's the scary part. Only about 4 to 5% of the rain that actually hits the ground ever reaches a pumpable state in the Trinity. 4 to 5%. And it takes 2 to 3 years for it to get there. 2 to 3 years. So the water that you're drawing out of the Trinity, if you are, it is water that fell at least 2 years ago, and maybe even longer. So sometimes when people say, well, it's raining, we got a really good rain, and if we got a really good rain, that ought to take and recharge the Trinity. Yeah, it does, about 2.5 years from now, at 450 feet. If you're going to go down into something around 700 feet, like the Hensel, it's going to take about 5 years for the water to get there. It is excruciatingly slow. And so the last part of this little slide here is that historically, we see a drop in the Trinity Aquifer of approximately 1 foot to 1.5 foot per year. Remember Rusty's house? Rusty's house that I told you about just a few minutes ago has gone down 2 feet per year in the last 54 years. What's scary about the Trinity Aquifer is I was on the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District for 4 years, and during the 4 years, I was on it for 8 years, and during the 8 years that I was on there, we monitored the various levels in the Trinity. That's on the website for the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District, and I can tell you that in the last 2 years, that is the last 24 months, the Trinity average has dropped 7.5 feet in 2 years. That's scary. All right, so let me change gears here and talk about rain harvesting. Not bad. Okay, check my time. When we talk about rain harvesting, we're talking about 2 different kinds. One is called a dry system and one's called a wet system. So when we talk about a dry system, what that means, the rain falls, it goes down the roof, falls into the gutter, goes into a pipe, and drops directly into the tank. And when it does, whenever the rain stops, then we call these pipes dry pipes because they're no longer wet. And as we look at a system, we have to have an overflow because you can't just go out there when the tank is full and say, stop, I'm full, I'm good. And so because of that, we have an overflow on there, and that would be called a dry system only because these pipes get dry. In a wet system, we have kind of a similar layout, except that when the rain falls and it goes down into the pipes, it's going to go underground over to the pipe, over to the tank, and then up and then drop into the tank. And the difference between the top of the tank and what we have here as the bottom of the gutter has to be about 3 feet. We can make it work at 2, but generally 5 feet is better. And you can see that from that level going straight across, that pipe is full of water from there down, and that pipe is full of water. And so we call that a wet system. In this system, usually the tank is far away from the home. It's not up in approximate to the home at all. In the first one, the dry system, it's usually right at the house. And then with this system, you need 2 things. You need to have an overflow and you need to have a low point clean out, because if the weatherman says, hey, the temperature is going to be less than 25 degrees, well, then you got to take and get the water out of these pipes right here, otherwise they're going to freeze. So this clean out is low point clean out, goes to daylight, and you would just take the water and drain out of the pipes. It has nothing to do with the water in the tank. It only drains out the water that you would see in there. And so now, that's really a very fast way of saying if we collect the water. There's a lot more to it, but I don't have time to talk about all of that. Let me talk about when the water comes out. When the water comes out of the tank, it's going to be used for one of 2 things. Either we're going to use it for animals and landscape, or we're going to use it for potable water. And if we're using it for for landscapes and animals, we want to have one of those pressure tanks like this that's going to allow us to not have this pump cycle and cycle and cycle. By having that, this will cycle about maybe 7 times, 8 times less than it would if we did not have one of these tanks. So the pressure tank just saves the life of the pump. So from there, it's going to go over to some landscape or some garden or some animals or something, and all of that is all you need. That's all you need, unless you're going to take and send it to a drip irrigation system in your garden. And if you're going to send it to a drip irrigation, that pump has to provide 25 pounds of pressure or more. And then that 20 micron filter goes in line, something like that. And that just keeps the little emitters from clogging up. If you use, let's say, a soaker hose, it will also help the soaker hose from not clogging up. And of course, rainwater does not have any minerals in it, and so therefore you don't get a calcium buildup that would be inside of your drippers or inside of your soaker hose. And if you have public water or you have a well, you probably have some of that buildup on your shower head, so you know what I'm referring to there. The alternative, the second alternative, would for potable water, and again, you have to start with a pump, and once we start from the pump, that water has to go through a filtration process, and that filter looks just like that, or that filtration process. And that's all it needs. It starts out, it has 2 pressure gauges on it, and the pressure gauge on the left tells you what the pressure is of the water going into the system. This pressure gauge tells you the water going out of the system, and if that one starts reading a number less than this one, then it means that you have a clog in the system, and it's time to change those filters. Those filters need to be changed once every quarter, unless you take another step that I'll show you here in just a second. But once a quarter is not bad. The filter that's inside of there costs $7 from a guy in Wimberley, or you can buy them at Home Depot for about $19.50. Then the water goes from there, it goes into the first one is a 20 micron filter. To give you an idea of that, if you pulled out 1 hair out of your head, that's 70 microns, so that's about 1/4 of a hair. Then it goes to a 5 micron filter. There's a reason why that's important. I'll get to that in a second. And then from there, it's going to go through a UV filter, which is not a filter at all. It's a sanitizer, and it exists to neutralize any germs or pathogens that might be in your water. So it does not kill them. It does not take them out of the water. It only renders them inert. They are no longer able to reproduce, and because they can't reproduce, they can't harm us. Now, if I could get all of you to look this way for just a little bit, inside of that filter, I'm going to blow that up. It looks like this, and there's a light bulb in the center. And the water comes in, and it spins around that light bulb. If it's hit by the light, if a germ is hit by the light, it's rendered inert. However, think of it this way. Let's suppose I don't have a 5 micron. I only have a 20 micron. A piece of dirt goes through, and the piece of dirt is 15 micron. If that's sitting there and you have a germ in the shadow, that germ could stay in the shadow and never get hit by the light. And therefore, it would not be rendered inert, and therefore it could hurt us. And the reason why the 5 micron is there is because at 5 micron, it's too small of a shadow for any germs to hide. And that's why that 5 micron is so critical. So that one right there at 5 micron has to be there in order for this to function properly. Now, my doctorate degree is in statistics, and I can tell you that the probability of that germ surviving is just not there. It's very, very, very small. But nevertheless, to be absolutely safe with the water, we take and recommend 20 micron, 5 micron, and then a UV filter. And that's going to go up there, and of course, we're going to have a pressure tank that's going along the way. Now, folks, if you are going to have potable water, that is all you need. You need nothing else, and now the water is going to come out, and it's going to be more pure than the water that you get from a water purveyor. And that's not to say anything bad about them. It's only the fact that we have absolutely no minerals in it. There are no germs in it whatsoever. It is absolutely pure water and very safe to drink. Now, I told you that these 2 filters had to be changed once every quarter. The filter that's inside of the UV filter has to be changed every year, no matter what. It does not matter that the fact that that light is on or off. The intensity of the bulb is the critical part. And so every year on the dot, you have to change that light bulb. You can change it earlier, but no later than 1 year. Otherwise, you can't guarantee that it's going to work. Now, I told you about changing these 2 filters once a quarter. I'm a little bit on the lazy side. I don't want to do that often, so I have a spin-down filter located inside of my line just like that. And the water comes in and it spins around this little part right there. Dirt gets caught right over here in the centrifugal force and down at the bottom. I open that little valve for about 4 seconds and close it, and I've cleaned out that. Because I have that, I only change these 2 filters every 1.5 years instead of every quarter. I also wanted to know how much water I was using, so I put a water meter in there. Water meter costs about $70. They're not terribly expensive, and you can put it inside your own home if you needed one. That little black thing right there would go around if there's any kind of pressure going or any kind of water that is going through your system. So if you turned everything on and you turned everything off rather, and then you looked at that, and if it's still going around, you got a leak somewhere. And that's probably in the toilet. That's the most frequent one. Now, that's all you need. Now, when I show this, sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, if I'm sending the water to the garden over here, it's not getting measured. And that's true. So what you can do is you can just shift it and put it like that. And if you put it like that, now all of the water that is going through your system is going to end up going through the garden process. All right, so from there, zoom. How much water can you collect? For every 1 square foot, you will collect 0.62 of a gallon. So on a 1,000 square foot roof, you would collect 620 gallons. And in a year, on 34 inches of normal rainfall, you'd collect about 21,000 gallons of water. And that is not enough to do very much in the way of grass at all. The size of the tank is dictated by the demand on the system. So typically indoors, we use 50 gallons of water per day per person. Multiply that times 3 people in your family. You have 150 gallons per day times 30 days is 4,500 gallons. And we have never had longer than 78 days with absolutely no rainfall in our area. And that happened in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And so because of that, we would recommend that you have a 3-month supply. And so therefore, we take 4,500 gallons times 3 is 13,500 gallons, which means that we would recommend a tank that's 15,000 gallons, and that's 19 feet in diameter, and they're all about 7 foot 6 inches tall. All right, so, so how did I get here? First, we are public service consultants. We do what we do absolutely free. My partners are sponsored by the Comal Master Gardeners, and 2 of us are sponsored by the Comal Trinity Groundwater Conservation District. We have, at my home, we have a water system, a 5,000 gallon tank for potable water, two 50,000 gallon for potable water, 2 5,000 gallon tanks for gardening. And so you're welcome to take and come to my home. I get about maybe 8 people a week who come to my home, and we go and I show them the system and show them how it all works. Second thing, one of the things that we do is we go to people's homes and we help them to design a rain harvesting system should they want one, or at least be informed about it. And we do that absolutely free. And we go from Pleasanton to Lake Medina to Lampasas to the Watermelon Thump. I mean, we're all over the place. And we started in Comal County, but it kind of exploded on us. And then, as I mentioned before, it is absolutely free. We don't charge anything. We are hosted by those organizations. Joe is actually on the Groundwater Conservation District Board of Directors. These 2 gents here are hosted by the Comal Master Gardeners. Briefly, this is what our website looks like, and if you were to go to the website and go up to here where it says gardening, you're going to get this little drop down, and the drop down will give you 4 choices. If you click on Master Gardeners, you get some information about the Master Gardeners. Drip irrigation gives you a little bit of a handout about how to install drip irrigation. Wicking Garden shows you how to make wicking tubs and how wicking tubs water your plants from underneath and go up. And then we also have a flyer in there about how to make rain barrels. If you go to this one over where it says sources, the first one is calculators, and there's a whole bunch of calculators for calculating different things, including one for animals. If you said, well, there's an Excel spreadsheet in there. If you said, I have 6 horses and 17 cows, 3 goats and 47 chickens, how much water do I need? It'll calculate all of that for you on that calculator page. The last one is the important one, and that's this one. It is sources. If you click there, you get 3 choices. This is just general information. There's a dry and a wet system right there. These are items I bought for my system 3.5 years ago, where I got them and what they cost me at that time. This one over here is the important one, because this one, if you click there, you get this Excel spreadsheet that has different companies, who to contact, address, phone number, email. And if you click again, it takes and goes down to that. And with that, in time. What a guy. Hopefully I haven't made you feel like that. Can I answer any questions that you might have?
First of all, thank you, Larry. And you mentioned something when you and I were talking before the meeting, that this packet is available, or the city has it, if any of us wanted to download it. Maybe just make a point now, if you could send it to all.
Yeah, it's on the website here, I mean, on their computer.
Okay.
And folks, you are welcome to that. You can put your own name on it and give it yourself if you want to. I'm absolutely dead serious. It's important that information gets out to people, so thank you.
Great, thanks. How about 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll move on with the rest of the meeting.
We offer a whole wide range of different, we have one coming up at the Bulverde Library, 14 weeks in succession, and those 14 weeks are on first aquifers, then on rain harvesting, then on drip irrigation, then on wicking gardens, then on a bunch of other things, including composting and how to trim trees and get them winterized. So that's what we do. If you go to rainbees.com, I put a card there at each one of your places for you to look at where we are, what we do. You're welcome to take and call us. If you are a member of another group someplace and you want some speakers to talk about this stuff, we would be happy to. But I'm telling you, folks, the water situation is not good. And I compliment you on what you're doing. You got to get people to stop watering grass. You know, at some point when we run out, it is projected, 2070, it is projected by the Texas Water Development Board that we're going to run out of water. It's not that we're not going to have water, we're not going to have any excess water at that time. And at that time, folks are not going to be able to go out into their lawn, lay on the grass, and suck it out of the grass, because it ain't coming up. We got to get people to realize we got to stop watering grass. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. Appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity. I know this is the first time you've done this with a speaker, and so I thank you very much for allowing me to be that first one. So,
Great, thanks. Lots of information, very concise. I made a note here that for the future, we might put this on an agenda item to how this information might be spread a little more further in the community. But again, Larry, thanks a lot, and you're welcome to stay. If not, appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to business items. B, approval of minutes for March 18th. Do we have anyone with any corrections, comments on the minutes? If not, I'd like a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes from the March 18th, 2025 meeting as they were presented.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item C, discussions, reports, updates from the city. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the month of April, we pumped 18.88 acre feet out of the Edwards with a year-to-date total of 58.08, with 509.28 available. Edwards is still in stage 4, and we are still in stage 2. Trinity, we pumped 54.45 acre feet with a year-to-date of 173.75. All required bacterial samples for the month came in good. Water loss was at 2.2%. National average is 16%. Completed 324 work orders, 56 locates. Total portal customers was 904, up 4 from the following month. Meter daily readability percentage was 99.61 for 1,694 assigned meters. We had one service line repair, estimated about 50,000 gallons lost on Glen Cove. Compression T that went to the service line developed a 1/4-inch hole in it, so we had to replace that and do some driveway, had to cut into the driveway, so we're going to have to repair a driveway here in a couple weeks. One leak adjustment, one approved, approval amount $118.50. Mark Schick attended a basic wastewater training. And as you can see on the 2252, they commenced installing that pipe for the water main relocation. They had have to wait a little bit for that pole bracing, but as you can see, that got braced and they're back at it. Hopefully that'll be finished soon. That's all I have to report.
Thanks, Stephen. Starting on my left. Any questions for the water department? Doug? Nathan?
Is there any scheduled maintenance coming up that we know of? Scheduled maintenance on anything? No, nothing in the pipeline?
Just curiosity on the 50,000 gallon service line leak. Can you tell us how that was discovered and how long it took and a little more detail?
I believe the resident called it in because it was starting to run down the street on Glen Cove. And so as they started digging it up, they had to basically start tracing it, because sometimes water coming up in one spot doesn't mean that's where it originated from. So they had to trace it, and they found that it was probably about 2 feet underneath the driveway. And so they had to cut the driveway and kind of repair it in a little about 2 foot by 2 foot square area, and basically filled it right back in. And then we have to get a contractor to come give us an estimate to repair the driveway on that. But about what it basically, there's no really telling how long it went, because so dry it is. It might have just went straight down, and then what came up is what we saw. So basically, I'm just estimating 50,000 gallons to be conservative.
Okay, and that particular line, do we know how old it was?
It was probably the original one in Forest Waters on Glen Cove.
All right, so no concern of similar problems in the immediate vicinity, or, I mean, probably just wear and beat on our driveway doesn't help.
It could have been a pebble that was right next to it, rubbing up against base, since underneath driveways pretty much have a lot of pebbly base and 3/4 inch base, so it might have meandered its way down, because basically those lines, they'll vibrate as the water's going through it. I mean, even if it's just a micro little movement, it's still gonna scratch away at something.
Okay, thank you.
What was the material the T was made out of?
Copper.
Copper? Okay.
Question for you. I was just trying to Google it, but do y'all keep track of what the J17 well is?
Yes.
Is it still 625? That's what I'm seeing.
It
Which would mean we would
was,
need to move stages.
today it was 626.1, the 10-day average, and the Comal Springs was 57 cubic feet per second.
So 626, 10-day rolling average, so stage 4 is at 630. And we're currently in stage 3, right? Currently in stage 3 restrictions. So do we need to move stage 4?
Garden Ridge, we're two.
We're in stage 2.
Or stage 2 still? I thought we were at 3. So when we need to, I mean, if the rolling average is 625 right now, the restrictions for stage 4 is 630, so why are we not in stage 4?
Because we have the alternative Trinity water to offset the Edwards.
Okay, so did we account for that? We need to account for that in the revisiting ordinance 61 then? Because looking at ordinance 61, it says the drought reduction measures are strictly based on the J17 well level.
I think when we get to that point, we talk about it, I think you'll see that it's covered, at least in terms of the wording that I've put in, reflecting how the city council and the mayor have made the decision about staying in stage 2. But I'm going to suggest that we
Okay.
cover that when we get there. Okay, no other questions. Thanks, Stephen. Next item, item 2, items applicable to the Water Commission, discussed at city council meetings. April 2nd meeting, simply I just gave a short update on what we're doing regarding our revision activity for ordinance 61 and 159. And just of interest, not related to water, I found it very interesting, this organization Retail Coach LLC, which is a retained consultancy firm, gave a, I thought, a very interesting presentation about efforts to recruit business to Garden Ridge. They seemed like they're very fast-moving, a lot of fresh thinking and good ideas. From the May 7th meeting, I was not able to attend, and there was no video minutes, and the minutes aren't out yet, so help me if I've missed anything here. I think the major thing in terms of our interest is that there was authorization by the city council to execute an agreement between the city and SAWS regarding the connection to the Vista Ridge pipeline. What I have read is that it is at this point what's called an emergency connection. It's not going to be routine wholesale water purchased by the city, but it'll be metered water used in the case of an emergency. That may move on to developments later on, and that my understanding at this point is from the engineer's presentation is that there's going to be meetings now working on the engineering of this. The routing of the pipeline is probably the main issue right now. Steve, was there anything that more to add to that? Again, I apologize, I wasn't there.
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, all right. Any additions from the staff about anything else that may have taken place that I'm not aware of? Okay, thank you. The next item, water rate analysis update. From last fall, when we recommended to the city council the agreements, or the rate increases that are in place now, it was pretty much unanimous that we wanted to start on this earlier with more data, more opportunity to look at things. So I had asked that this be placed in the agenda for that purpose. And from that, Robin has prepared a presentation that I've had a chance to see, and I'll turn it over to Robin now to start that. Thank you. And while we're doing that, I'll leave it to Robin to decide whether she wants to field questions while the presentation's going on, or let her go through the whole thing, and we'll ask them at the end.
Okay, good evening. We went ahead and went through the water. Taking city website, and this is what was voted for in the fiscal year 2025. So City Council approved the fiscal year 2025 water rates consisting of a $5 base rate increase and a 1% tier rate increase. That went into effect on our December 2024 bill. So we've been in this new rate for about 5 months. This is kind of what was in the packet or on the agenda. The 3-year comparison.
It's not you.
I can go stand up there if I need to. Okay, sorry about that. So if you look in the first column, fiscal year 2023, and you kind of see what our inside consumption has been, we have our ranges set from 0 to 10,000 gallons, 11,000 to 20,000, and so forth. We have the inside city, and then we go to our outside city limits. We subtotal each one of those, and then we have a total monthly water consumption. So this is what we're averaging monthly. Fiscal year 2023, 26 million. May 2023 to April 2024, we look at it's like 25,780,000. And then in this last range period, we went from May of 2024 to April of 2025, and we're down to 25 million, about 19,000 gallons. So again, total annual water consumption. So we went from fiscal year 2023, 318 million, May of 23 to April 24, 309 million, down to May through April of this year, 300 million. So if you kind of see the trend there, where we have consumed about 9 million gallons less each year of data here. The next slide here, we also are looking at the number of meters. That has really not, we're not really expecting our meters to change significantly. We don't really have any new development, well, until these commercial start developing on 2252, and that's coming. But we look at the revenue for the last 3 years. So fiscal year 2023, if you look at total revenue, we were at 2.2 million, 2.295 million. May 23 to April 24, 2.2. And then this last May 24th to April 2025, 2.1. These ones compared to our actual water sales and accounting, very, very close. So we're calculating all these averages very, very closely to our actual water sales. And then we have the sales tables and graphs. So just to give you an idea, I mean, obviously our highest usage months are in the summer, and you can see that on the graph. Looking at the last 4 years, fiscal year 2022 through current, you have our water sales data looking at for the last 4 years. And then we also have our water consumed in 1,000 gallons. Again, just it lines up with the water sales, but I just trying to give you a picture of how many gallons we have dropped over the last 3 years, 4 years. So if we take this same data and kind of project out, there was, to me, a couple options. If I project that we are losing another 9 million gallons this year, which probably wouldn't. I mean, it seems like it would level out at some point. We're not just going to keep losing 9 million gallons a year in water consumption, but it is still continuing to go down. So potentially, if we're tracking the same the last 3 years, or we could, you know, somewhere stay in the same consumption range as we did this May 2024 to April 2025. So I just put in a couple of projections there, where we say we annually may consume from May of 2025 to April of 2026, 291 million to around 300 million. So we have like a 9 million gallon difference. In revenue, it's, you know, it's amounting to about $98,000 that we're talking. Those 9 million gallons is about $98,000 in revenue. So it's just projecting, and you know, the number of meters, it's not going to change, I don't think, here significantly in the next year. What I really wanted to take a minute and kind of go into, New Braunfels Utilities, they just did the Comal County Commissioner Court in April. They did a presentation, and they all showed residential water bill comparison. And I found this very, very interesting because they looked at essential use of 3,000 gallons for all of our area. So we are seeing San Antonio water, SAWS, Austin water, New Braunfels, City of Buda, Schertz, Green Valley. You have San Marcos, Cibolo, Seguin, Spring Hills, Kyle, Canyon Lake, Crystal Clear. It's a great sample of all of the cities around us, and it kind of shows where we fall on that consumption or the bill. So this is the bill comparisons for an estimated 3,000 gallons, and it is assuming a 5/8 meter size. So if you look at this, we are cheaper than average on essential use, 3,000 gallons. The next slide is looking at average use, 6,000 gallons, and we are like the fifth cheapest city for water bill compared to all the cities around us. The biggest difference that you'll see is in 25,000 gallons. We are the cheapest water bill for moderate use, 25,000 gallons. I think this is it's a good tool for us to look at and see where we fall compared to other utilities in our area. And so with that in mind, city is looking at our budget for 2026. We do have some options here. I do think that another rate increase is needed for us to accomplish our debt services, capital outlays, projects, maintenance, and operations that we have coming. And if you'll notice, the expenditures, you know, our maintenance and operation, debt services, capital outlay, we have a few projects besides the Vista Ridge pipeline. We have our ground tank rehab that we're planning to do in fiscal year 2026. We have about 6 valves that are needing replacing, and that's going to be a total of $22,000. I know that Ryan wasn't able to be here tonight, but he did express, and he has started the process of getting an engineer to get us a 5-year projection of what our capital improvement projects and a capital improvement plan. So I know he is working on that, but we kind of already know, even in this next couple of years, we have some pretty big projects that we are attempting with just even the Vista Ridge project. And this slide is taking into effect as if we've already done the Vista Ridge this year. It's probably most likely not going to be in this fiscal year, but once it is done, we are using money from the general fund to fund this right now, and that's what's in the budget. And so at some point, water will have to pay that back to the general fund. So if you kind of are looking at where we are, our fund balance, our unrestricted fund balance, and down at the very bottom, you'll see how many months of expenditures that we have with our current water rates. When we have no change in our water rates, it's at 5.39 months for fiscal year 2026. If you notice, then when we calculate out how much we'd actually get by increasing base rates $1 is going to be worth about $21,000 a year, $21,594. So when you're looking at how much revenue would get added by $1, it's not like significant revenue. Increase in tier rate by 1% is worth $14,257 a year. So we're talking like 1% an increase gives us $14,257 more in our revenue for the year. So I mean, it's something to consider. I was leaving this with, I don't think y'all are making any decisions tonight, but it's just for something to start thinking about that you can review. And then the last slide here, any of these options that we'd look at to maybe propose, you can see what an actual person's bill would look like at each of those options. So we have the current bill, say somebody was at 10,000 gallons, their current bill is $63.48. You went all the way to option 5, $3 base rate and 9% increase. That same person's bill is $67.05. So you kind of see the impact on each person of what their bill would look like. And that's really all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. This is proverbially drinking out of a 5-inch line.
I was trying to beat him with that.
A lot of, yes, no, very well done. I want to open this up for question and discussion, but first, when we get done, I'm going to list off some suggestions of what I'd like to do. I view this as a process. I think when we talked yesterday, we've got basically up through June or July, I think, to work on this, and before we need to firm up some numbers. So we have a nice window to work with, and I'm going to make some suggestions and requests. But for now, I'd like to start with questions for Robin. And by the way, I think this you have this packet here.
Yes,
Okay.
hopefully you all received a copy of that.
Okay.
Do you happen to know what the average usage is in gallons per month? Maybe Steve, you know? Does anybody know?
So if we go back
Is that in here?
to, you mean in the tiers?
Just an average Garden Ridge customer uses X gallons per month.
Well, if you see here, we have in our ranges, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. In the city limits, you see how it drops off after 40,000. So you have your 12 million gallons in the 0 to 10. I'm looking at May 2024 to April 2025. So I'm looking at that third column right there. Do you see where it says 12 million? And then you have 6 million in 11 to 20, 3 million, 21 to 30, 31 to 40 is 1.3 million. And then we drop off here at 500,000. And then we kind of continue to decline the higher you get. I would say that our average probably water users less than 40,000 gallons. I would say over average probably would be anywhere over the 41 to 50,000 gallons, because it does cycle through every tier. So if somebody uses 45,000 gallons, they're getting rated, they're getting billed at the 0 to 10 range first, then in the 20 to 11 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and then that last, so that only 5,000 gallons is being billed at that rate for 41 to 50. So it cycles through each tier. But I would say, I mean, if you notice how it drops off after the 40,000, I would say that's kind of where the majority of our customers inside the city limits use less than 40.
Okay, yeah, my mind's going back to ordinance 61.
The
right? I'm seeing where,
45,000,
You know,
yes.
at over 40,000, the surcharge starts, so maybe that's a number we revisit and potentially lower as well, so, okay, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, you had commented about, looked like we're reducing about 9 million a year. Again, I think comment eventually is going to get a point where we're not going to drop 9 million. It's going to be maybe 5, with all the conservation and everything they're doing. Any wild guess as far as when we might hit that plateau or start leveling off there?
I think Stephen might have a little bit better idea of that. Do you see a projection where we might start leveling off? I mean, it's not likely that we'll keep losing 9 million gallons a year in consumption.
I think we're running pretty consistent right now. Everybody's gotten used to the drought, and Garden Ridge is pretty much watching how they're watering for the most part. I'm not seeing anything really significant, but I think we're pretty much at the level off point.
Well, and if you look at our graph for this year, so far, 2025 is tracking a little higher at the beginning of the year than the prior years. We obviously get our heaviest usage in the summer. That's why this is always a little hard to project, because we already know, are we going to go way up like we did in 2022? Probably not, but maybe we'll stay consistent like we did in 2024. We're trending over just slightly what we did in 2024.
A thought on that might be, during this window of review, would be, I made a note about contacting other cities just to see what kind of thinking they're at, as far as, I mean, everybody's looking at the same thing, whether cities are seeing the drops that we're seeing, and if they see it flatten out. The big variable with us, of course, is we have huge lots compared to a lot of the other cities that are in comparison.
Well, and we're not developing anymore, residentially. We're
Right.
kind of, we've
Have a
reached our
static
capacity in our square mileage. So the cities that have a lot of square mileage and they're continually adding customers are going to have
Yeah,
obviously higher growth.
yeah. But per capita, there may be some interesting information. Steve, Kevin?
Mr. Chair, how far are we going into this right now before I start asking questions?
I'd say maybe 5 minutes more. I mean, this is an endlessly deep discussion. The purpose of tonight was not to do that, but to listen to, I mean, this is valuable data. I was pulling water rates from cities and starting to build a spreadsheet myself, and I said a big thank you when I saw this yesterday. New Braunfels has done a lot of work for us. So I think just mainly to find out what further data we might want to have, I think would be appropriate. I'm going to have some comments here that are going to shed some light on some other information that's coming in some future meetings.
Okay, then I'll save this, instead of so much questions, as just quick observations. And first of all, as I know how hard this is, so thank you very much, because I got stuck with it for many years in a row, so I appreciate it. And I like that you pointed out that the tier consumption is not bills, it's tiers. So every gallon in the higher tiers is also in the lower tiers. So it makes it a little hard to interpret what's going on. So keep that in mind as you're reviewing. The other thing is, yes, New Braunfels provided a lot of data, but please be aware of the fact that most of those cities are not comparable to Garden Ridge. And second, I don't know exactly how they did it because their 25,000 gallon bill limit does not match our 25,000. It's not far off, but it's a little bit off, so they were probably using maybe one cycle older data. That doesn't really matter. Just be aware. If you ask for what more data we need, we probably need to get like Chavano Park and a couple other cities that have large lots and similar bill structures in addition to. These are all good, but we just got to remember that they have some different considerations. And anyway, I'll leave that alone. I think the biggest comment I want to make is simply, it's two things. It was either 4 or 5 years ago, I have to go back and look at my records, but the city made a conscious decision to encourage conservation by increasing the higher tier rates, and it was substantial. So in part what we're seeing is just the effect of that as people are adjusting, as you said, adjusting to the drought and everything else. The other big change has been the AMI meters. So number one, we're getting better data, and number two, so is the customer, and we're finding leaks a little bit earlier, and we're finding one of the problems is if they find the leak earlier, less went through the meter. So we should keep in mind that too. We might have to look at the longer term cost structure and not just a base rate and a tier rate. We might have to look at some other options. I also, and I've mentioned this several times before, and I don't know how we fix it. I really don't. But we continue to do this process on the wrong end. So we come up with our rates, we say this is what we're going to get, then the budget's done, and we end up, it's still 6 months or less, and it's been that way for 4 years. And every year we say we're going to increase it 3%, trying to close that gap, and we don't do it. We need to have that capital infrastructure portion first. And then based on that and the planned expenditures, we need to set a rate that's going to be valid for 4 to 5 years. And then the budget needs to be made to live within that rate. We've added several projects. They're all good projects. I don't have any complaint with the projects, but we add them and then we go, well, let's make everything fit after the fact. And I'm getting to where we need to come up with a longer term strategy on how to do this. Otherwise, we're just kicking the can down the road one more time. And so I think that's my biggest frustration is, despite 4 years of trying, we haven't moved the needle in any significant amount. And now we're being told we're taking money out of the general fund for a project the water has to pay back, and it wasn't part of this commission's discussions. So council has the right to do whatever they want. I understand that, but then we get told come up with a rate that makes it work, and I just think that's backwards. So and that's not your fault. I did the same exact problem.
Well, and I do know that is a priority of Ryan's. He's already addressed it with me that he's getting some engineers on it. He wants that capital improvement project or the plan in place, and that is something that he is focused on right now.
And they need to do that, so I'm glad to hear that. But having been one, engineers will tell you how much something costs and how big it needs to be, but they're not the ones who decide what needs to be in your capital improvement plan. So I think we could still have some input on what the priorities are, and then they can get and do what they need to do. But the last one was 2016, I think, the last 5-year improvement plan. I could be off, but it's been a while. It's been way more than 5 years. And that one was simply the distribution network, because that's what the water engineers do. Do we have the adequate distribution network? So it didn't address the tank or the above ground storage or any of those other things. So at some point, we have to start advocating for those longer-term needs. We aren't going to fix it in this budget cycle. I get that. We're not. But I just don't want to roll over and say, here's another 3% every year and not have made some difference. So anyway, thank you for indulging me.
That's exactly what we want to do right now, is get the shape and form out. I'm going to put my head down here and read some things just so that I don't miss this. Again, you heard what my goals were, is to try and, as best we can, to step this forward. My request is that the commission members review this information, work with the numbers, and with that, is it possible for those of us who might be interested to get the live spreadsheets? Because I'm a real data guy, and I could see manipulating and looking at those data. So if anyone is interested in getting live spreadsheets, you could contact Robin directly. I will be doing that. And the goal is to be prepared for discussion at the next meeting. I intend to have the commission meet monthly. We're going to have agenda items here for the near future, so plan on that, please. Ryan is going to join us in the next meeting. I think the city engineer, I believe his name is Hank, is going to be joining us. And in particular, the task, and I think this is where we want to be ready, is to talk about capital improvement. Ryan is starting to work on that. Obviously, he's new, but I think he needs to also hear a bit of the history of this. I was very encouraged by the comments when he and I met yesterday. In particular, Ryan and Steve are going to talk about capital improvement project plans. I think we need to recognize and be questioning. We have an aging system. I mean, I heard yesterday there's 6 valves that are going to be replaced. That happens. I look at this, we're like entering the era of solar power, but we still need to keep the utility lines running, You got a huge capital investment in an installed base. I think we all intuitively know what we're seeing. We need to shape this into questions. I think Ryan is going to be very engaged with us on this. Some of the issues before us are funding the water system in the light of decreasing to flat water use, infrastructure cost increases. The cost to do anything has soared tremendously from whatever prior estimates. Just little glimpses that we've gotten on tank renovation and so on show that the numbers are going up. We got to consider base versus tier changes. And I think the amount and frequency of rate increases. Are we going to adopt an annual so much, or do we want to say we have big things to do, city, and this is going to be a big increase, and then we leave it alone? I'm not advocating either way. These are things that I'd like to ask you all to think about. The Garden Ridge water costs versus other nearby cities. Kevin's point is well taken. Shivano, Alamo Heights, if we can break that out, areas that have large lots are a better blueprint for water usage. They're relatively affluent areas. I will dig in and try and pull that information together. And the differences between Garden Ridge and other cities, lot sizes, community goals. We place a high value on the appearance of this community, and we need to pay attention to that. The plan is to discuss this each meeting this spring and summer and be prepared with the recommendations for the budget deadline. So that's my thoughts about how we would move forward. Anything anybody would like to add to that in terms of goals that we should be working on? This is a homework assignment for all of us. Okay. Again, thank you, Robin. That was more information than I was expecting from our first meeting. It's terrific. It's a good framework to work on. Okay. Moving on. Item number 4, and it looks like we're on track here. Ordinance number 61, Drought Management Plan. Again, we've been through round 1 of this. A couple weeks ago, you got this next draft that I sent out. I'd like to field comments, and if they're extensive, please hand them to me in writing, and we'll continue to massage this. So I'll turn it over to all of you at this point. You've seen my best shot at this point.
I can start. Did you want to just go like in order, or do you want to work through together? Or you want each of us to go one at a time and give you what we have?
I'd say I'll start on the left, and if there's a discussion that goes back and forth, that's fine, but kick the ball off. Again, I'm looking for critiques, comments. Hopefully, we're zeroing in on what we want to do here. But each month, I want to absorb your comments, reword them. Again, I'm looking at a lot of detail here, so I may have missed some really big concept or flubbed the numbers, and I really want a course correction on that if I have.
All right, he's looking, I'll go. So, yeah, again, I just want to focus on section 3 mainly, right? So just making sure that it's clear on all the considerations that make us move to different stages within the drought restrictions. I have the original open here, and I'm looking at your marked up one. It looks like the trigger points have just kind of consolidated into the very top kind of summary section of the section 3. So I think it may, where does it mention it? Yeah, now I don't even see the Trinity Aquifer reference in the draft. So if there's some way we can say, hey, X, Y, and Z has to happen to move to X, Y, and Z stage, right? Very clear, because in my mind, I think we should be aligned with the stages of the Edwards Aquifer, right? We're at half the stage of what it is today. So that, and then, reviewing, that's why I was asking the data on, those surcharges are increasing over the 40,000. Do we want to reduce that number potentially? Like Kevin was mentioning, putting those high surcharges on the high users, we saw the reduction. Maybe we do it again. I don't know when the last time that happened. But those are kind of my two highlights I'd like to kind of see in this. Does that make
In
sense?
some of my notes to all of you, I purposely said I didn't try and touch tier numbers because it doesn't really affect the wording of the stages and what people have to do. I would suggest that we could probably roll that into the water rate discussion, but quite honestly, I didn't look at that. I'm aware of the history of us bumping those up for water conservation. Section 3 demand, there was really two things. Section 3 and Section 4, I really wanted to separate demand reduction measures, which are responses to drought, from what are called true emergencies. Those, in some comments I received from Kevin and others, were a little, the wording was a little confused. I left Section 3 specifically kind of vague because that's the sort of discussions that have gone on in the city. Looking at, we have the Trinity, we have water level, we have water going down, we've got a new water use going down, we have a very good automated system, very low leakage from our system. That I've heard the prior mayor talk about this. You put all this together, and we seem comfortable being in stage 2. I wanted to reflect that seems to be the reality of how we choose to run this city, because this isn't SAWS. We're 5,000 people, and I think we need to recognize this stuff, but if I'm wrong on that, I need to be told, because I don't have a clue. I mean, if you'd plug in J17 well level, we'd be at a totally different stage.
And SAWS doesn't even, so that's Edwards Aquifer Authority. That's their stage.
Right.
And so SAWS has other sources as well. So they're, I think last time I looked, they were at stage 3, thinking about 4. But I think to answer what Commissioner Dorsey's talking about, in the definitions, you talk about trigger conditions and trigger points. And I think in Section 3, that paragraph, you're actually talking about a trigger condition, but you use the word trigger point.
Okay.
So those J17 levels are the trigger conditions for Edwards Aquifer Authority. And that is one factor that the city uses to consider their drought stage. I think if you change it to trigger condition instead of trigger point, you'll be consistent.
Thank you. Going back to why we started this Section 3, Section 4 wording was kind of a major part of this. Again, it's my call, but that's why we're looking at it. I would suggest, because that's the way we've operated, that we keep this, but if the wording isn't, the purpose of this is also to make sure that the wording is workable for the city council and mayor, and it's something that they can explain to the citizenry if we do have to make changes. And that's, those are the wickets that I think we need to pass. I'll go back and look at the issue of points versus conditions. That's the kind of stuff that,
Does it mention how? I know it says the mayor proclaims it, right, the different stage, but is it something that us as a water commission recommends to city council to vote on, that then the mayor says yea or nay? Or like, what is the process to get that going? Is there something that, you know, Steve's saying, hey, here's the latest data, should we move stages? You know, how does that work? Anybody know?
Yeah, Marissa?
I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience is it's usually staff, Stephen, or it was our former city manager, both of them going to the mayor to get where we are now in the stages. So I can imagine that's how it would continue. I know Stephen's looking at this multiple times a day. He has a running spreadsheet that he's updating. And so it does include a lot more things than just looking at the stage that the Edwards is in, and knowing that it is a big deal to this city if we do move up to stage 3, because it is very different than us being in stage 2. So that decision is not taken lightly. So it wouldn't come to the commission, though. It's something that is internal, staff does and recommends to the mayor, and the mayor would then authorize that by an order or a proclamation, and then it would go to council the following month. That's how it's happened in the past when we went into stage 1 and stage 2.
It would be nice if we could define what those other conditions were. You know, if I'm looking at the ordinance and making a decision, just based on the Edwards Aquifer, I mean, it says we should be doing something different than what we're doing. But if we can add those or define what those conditions are, I mean, could you explain what some of those conditions are? All right, obviously Trinity.
Well, basically, we'll look out also the daily demand. Like say the winter time, our daily demand is probably about 500,000 to 600,000 gallons a day. Summertime, we say if the aquifer was topped off at the best it's ever been, I've seen 2 million, 2.5 million a day. Right now, we're hitting probably 1 million a day currently, and then some days, even if we get a little sprinkle of rain, it'll go back down to 700,000. So it's a fluid, it's really fluid on how to judge this. So, but then you'll basically take an average, and if the average is about 700,000 to 600,000, then we're pretty safe to be in stage 2. Right now, we have a projected flow chart that takes us all the way to December 31st. And it takes away how much Edwards takes away from us daily. Because whenever Edwards is in stage 4, that means we lose 0.7 acre feet a day. At the beginning of the year, we start out with 653 acre feet. So, like now, currently as today, we've lost 100 acre feet from Edwards. So when we project all that out, we can pump, right now, if we were to stay in stage 4 for the rest of the year, we could pump 1.33 acre feet and end up with 20 acre feet reserve on December 31st. So with that said, that's just Edwards by itself. Then Trinity, we have a little bit more of a play with that one, so we can pump more out of the Trinity. And basically, we're gonna end up pumping more out of the Trinity than we do of the Edwards. So that's one of the major decisions on how we can gauge what level we're in. But I'm sure we can come up with a more refined solution. I mean, possibly, I don't know, I'll point this to our guest speaker. Does the Trinity Aquifer have any type of test well that they go by on its condition?
17, you mean the number of wells?
No, just like J17, there's a J17 for Edwards, but does Trinity have sort of a standard that they go by, that they find out what?
They do not.
Okay.
The groundwater conservation has, they do manage the amount, but it's all having to do with the amount of water that's been allocated to them by either GMA 9 or GMA 10.
Okay. but to come up with some sort of more solid gauge would be more ideal, I would think also. But right now, we go by pumping gallons per day and seeing if there's any spikes or not. If there's some sort of significant spike, then maybe we'd suggest going to stage 3. But right now, it's pretty level.
Yeah, so the current ordinance, section 3B, trigger points, it has 4 things listed. Why don't you scroll down a little bit? You scroll to the next page. Oh, it's not in the draft, never mind. So it just basically states discretion of the mayor based on seasonality, different things like that, precipitation, and then 2 is the J17 well level. 3 is Trinity Aquifer well drops to 600 gallons per minute, or drawdown level of the well reaches 75 feet above the transponder, and then infrastructure damage. So those are kind of the 4 conditions that are in the existing one, right? And so do we know what the Trinity Aquifer gallons per minute is right now? Is it below 600?
About 650 gallons per minute.
And that comes from individual wells though, right? That's your individual well drawdown
Yeah,
average?
that was the main well up there, up at our shop. And I believe back when that was written, they were trying to figure out if the aquifer dropped to a point where it was affecting the GPMs, but in reality, it was just a bad pump and motor down there. And I don't know why that even got put in there. But like, say, our other Trinity well at Schoenthal, with the 2 wells running at the same time, we get about 530 gallons per minute out of that one.
Okay, so maybe we need an equivalent trigger point for the Trinity, right? We have it in here for the Edwards, based on whatever level is one of the trigger points. There should be something similar to be able to measure against the Trinity so we know our 2 sources and where we're at to gauge what stage we should be in.
I'll, just to move this discussion along, I'll take that under advisement, this issue of maybe adding back some factors. I consciously took them away because I knew there was a myriad of issues, but if that would help putting some back, I'm not going to commit to changing this a whole lot because I'm really writing more clearly what we actually do. And the mayor sits down and gets a lot of input on different things. I don't know how to be more precise than that's what's going on.
I mean, if you wanted to spell out more, you could take what's in that paragraph as a paragraph and just put them as a list, but I don't think you can get overly specific because as Stephen said, seasonality matters, long-range precipitation forecast matters. We got, roughly 2 million gallons of elevated storage. That's your pressure capacity during the day. So if you start using more than a million gallons pumping a day, you start getting close to, will we have enough pressure? So, because it takes time for the pumps to recover that. So those are all factors that the staff looks at. And then one that's not in here, and it really can't be in here, is I'm sure, at least I would if I were in their position, the mayor would consider what do the surrounding cities do, because if we're at stage 1 and they're at stage 4, there's going to be some heat directed our way, right? So there's just a lot of factors that go in there. So they're not really triggers. And I think that's why we wanted to take them out, because it wasn't a if this, then that. It was more of a discussion item. But you kept the J17 in there because that is, all the cities look at the Edwards Aquifer Authority J17 well to kind of gauge about where they're at. So the worse that gets, the more pressure there is for us to think about, lowering it. So anyway, that's my input, but it's certainly worth discussion.
Does it dictate how long a stage has to be? It could be fluid, right? If it's right now, I don't know, why do we have to be in stage 2 for a year, right? We don't. Every month why couldn't we change the stage based on the current situation? It's just a proclamation. that
You
gets signed,
can.
right? It's not
Something like stage 3, it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to implement. So by the time they publish it and say it's coming, there's a 2-week cycle and then it goes with the billing. So from practical terms, a month is about the minimum you could do it. And because of the implications that are in there, we try to avoid changing too much. But I know you didn't want to drag this out. I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying that's kind of like the history, and it's certainly worth discussion.
I'd like to move on to catch any other comments. Again, we've got a couple months to continue to massage this. Your points are noted. Again, I wanted to be clear once again of what the goal of it was. was because I'm trying to reflect reality a little more clearly than the previous ordinance. That was the input that I had gotten a year ago when we started looking at this. Okay, noted, I've got all your comments. Other areas, let's look for semi-glaring problems.
Okay, I'll hand you this. There's not much. In the definitions, we still struggle, like, there's a whole bunch of different categories, water categories, like domestic use, landscape, et cetera, other outside use, and some of them are still hard to understand. So I was thinking maybe you could consider organizing it with one overarching one that says water use categories, and then just kind of group them all together. But that's not obviously a glaring problem. Under handheld hose, I'm still, physically held or attended. I mean, do they have to physically hold it in their hand, or can they stand there? And then, but I would think about maybe we should limit it to a size, like 3/4 inch diameter or something like that. In other words, the flow weight through the hose might be relevant. Anyway, I'll skip that because you'll be able to see it anyway. Portable sprinkler, any movable hose device operated unattended. Well, what if it is attended? Does it matter if I'm watching my lawn tractor drive around? It's still a sprinkler. And
Some of my best work there.
I know, it's good. After reading all these special variances that we're adding, which I completely agree with, I thought maybe you might consider adding that the city could charge a small administrative fee to cover the goal. Like, I put down $25, but you could ask the staff what's reasonable.
All right, I'll just put that in there and I'll take it.
And that kind of goes with the revenue problem we're talking about. And then at the very end, on the variances may be granted, or something about that hardship in no way was the result of applicant's own actions. I just underlined that in no way may be overly broad.
Okay.
Like, it may be my own actions when I, had a heart attack or whatever it was, but it could lead, we might need to make that a little bit tighter.
Before you leave that area, I want to touch right above that. I wrestled with this issue of when a variance may be granted, when due to special circumstances, an undue hardship will result, as with the old wording. I added a unique situation. We've been confronted, and I want some help to make sure I'm capturing the word right. We've been confronted by some really compelling arguments that we weren't able to act on. And so I want to reflect back on, the family that came to us with a swimming pool variance request and demonstratively proved it was better not to haul water. And we were just wrapped by this conversation, but we couldn't approve it. Now, it became moot in the end. But help me with that. I tried to think what would be words that would give us some more room to look at creative solutions is another thought I had. But anyway.
Well, I actually think you did good, because it says unique situation, but then it defines the bounds, right?
Okay.
Doesn't violate intent, purpose, or spirit.
All right.
Relief sought will not cause significant harm.
All right.
I think it's pretty good.
All right, good. I'm done. Move on.
Then under in Appendix A, there's just, this is minor, and again, I hand this to you, but there's, like, wasting water is listed in there, but it slightly differs from the definition. My biggest issue is under the stage, like stage 2, for instance, item 2 has water with a handheld hose, bucket drip irrigation soaker, and then it gives hours restriction, and I'm not sure we need the hour restriction at that point. But if we do, I would suggest instead of 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. to go to something like 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., just because if I got to use a handheld hose and I got to attend it, it might be helpful to have daylight. And the same thing under stage 3, it's got 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. If we need to have it, then maybe make it 9 a.m. for that. So just big comments, just look at the times and make sure they make sense.
Yeah, I wrestled with those, and obviously we want to, during the higher stages, truncate any water use during the heat of the day. But if an hour makes it more palatable, then that's something to look at, for sure.
Just to make sure that it's practical with the handheld. And then the last thing on stage 3, and I know you don't like it, but we still have that thing about hauling water in the pool. The building permit with the pool. And I'm okay with, it's going to be harder in stage 3, I'm okay with that. But I just think we should look at other options than you're not going to get a permit, you're going to haul the water. For instance, one option could be, we're not going to give you a permit, period, if we're in stage 3. I mean, that would be the most restrictive. The other one might be, we're going to go to a two-stage permit. We'll give you the permit for initial construction, but you're going to need another one before you come back to fill it. Or the final one is you just say, okay, I'm going to give you a permit, but you just write in here that it's prohibited to fill it with city water. But we don't have to say you have to prove to me it's going to come from somewhere else. You just prohibit it using city water, and they can figure out how they want to do it. So I don't like tying building permits to this because it takes too dang long to get the building permit, right? Stages can change.
I think specifically on I just went through this. Michelle's smiling. We just built a pool and just had to haul in water. But specifying, because where they haul the water from is the same source that the city draws from. So prove to me you're pulling it somewhere else. Otherwise, what's the difference? Right? We're still affecting the same source. And we're not getting the revenue as a city.
And we dropped that out of stage 2.
Yeah.
But you're right, and that was the subject of a variance like I had mentioned. Okay, yeah, I wrestled with that in stage 3. Again, I just don't know how agonizing the city gets when it's in stage 3, where it would be unacceptable to even start a pool in stage 3. So maybe that's the other solution, is we just axe it in stage 3. I'll think about it, and I'll come back with some new words.
Sounds good. And the rest of it's minor. I'll give it to you on the.
Okay.
Minor, I'll give you.
Okay, we're going to try and wrap this up here. 159, not a lot of changes to that. Any comments? I think we haven't really touched on this before because it wasn't in the agenda before. I had left it off. Just briefly, I wanted to clean up new landscaping. A lot of this is direct lifts off of New Braunfels wording, and also saws in particular, and it was a fantastic idea. If you're going to put in a new lawn, you got to have good dirt underneath it. And these are saws words about organic matter, amount of soil. If you wanted to know, I didn't invent that. This is from sources that employ a lot more people than we do.
I think maybe a little less, though, for our rocky soil would be okay. That's a lot, 4 inches tall.
Any comments at this point for 159, because we want to try and move on. It's not intended to be, actually, it's a pretty good ordinance
Hand
right
it
now.
to you,
All right.
and, but I don't, I'm just wondering if anybody remembers, because I don't remember that 13,068 square feet number. Is that in the administrative code, or where did that, sounds a little too specific for us to have ever come up with.
I did, but I can't remember. It wasn't invented. It was, actually, I think it's currently in the ordinance. but-
No, it is currently there. I just don't remember where
I
it
see.
came from.
Okay. That's roughly a quarter acre, I think. But-
Yeah, so
okay,
what it
all right.
basically means is,
Okay.
for the size of house you have, you can irrigate half your lawn.
Make a
And-
note of that, and
yeah.
I'll do some research to see if that's still a good number. Okay. Okay, so again, the plan will be, I'll take this, work on it, we'll review it again, and hopefully it'll get closer and closer. Future agenda items. I'd like to put a couple in and then turn it over to the commission for discussion. Water capital improvement plan, Ryan and the city engineer for next week, and ordinance 61 and 159 review, and Vista Ridge pipeline connection plans. I'd like to formalize that in front of the commission. Any other items like to have?
Yeah, can we talk specifically on the drought management plan and how we're assessing stages? And the possibility of adding a process to recommend moving stages to the city council to vote on, if that's possible. I just think we're not doing it enough, and it's already low, it's getting hotter, and we're only at 2. So I think we should reassess how we do that.
Okay, we can add it. We can't discuss it now, but we can add it as an agenda item. Clear enough for you to, okay. Okay, thanks, Michelle. This is a second citizen comment period. Larry, unless you'd like to come up and chat some.
Suggest that you may want to look at is if you go back a little bit, you come up with, you could irrigate 13,000 square feet of grass area. 13,000 square feet in a month is 32,000 gallons of water. And that's what you.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate the comment.
And I think you'll need to sign in.
Friend of the court. Okay, there's no other citizens' comments then. German, this concludes all the items on the agenda. The meeting is adjourned at 7:38.
Sorry, I made you eat that steak.
No, I actually built the minute.